I am Elena, 28 years old. If someone asks me about my family, I usually just smile and say simply, "It's complicated." But the truth is that since I was 13 years old, I knew that the concept of family in my family was different from anyone else's. When my parents divorced, I naively thought, it must be because my father had an affair that my mother was angry, so the family was broken. But that night, when my mother walked into my room near midnight, shook me awake just to say, "You are the reason your father left," I realized no one cared that I was just a kid. From then on, every night my mother tried to vent her anger on me. Sometimes she would call me crazy. Sometimes she would scream, "You're not like anyone else in this family." I learned to be quiet. I tried to be good, study well, and do all the housework, hoping that my mother would calm down. But she didn't. As for my brother David, who was 3 years older than me, he was always my mother's only consolation. Every time I did something small wrong, my mother would compare. "Look at David and learn from him. Has he ever argued with me?" David was different. He was always praised for just washing a few dishes or taking out the trash once. When I received a full scholarship to study abroad, my mother calmly said, "It's useless to go and come back with an empty head." But David only needed to change his phone, and my mother would invite all the relatives over to show off. Still, I hoped that one day he would understand me, that I was just a little sister trying to survive in his shadow. And strangely enough, that opportunity came last year when I returned after finishing my master's degree in Europe. I didn't want to go back to my hometown, where my mother lives, so I chose to stay in the old city where I went to university and where my boyfriend James works. While I was looking for a job, I didn't want to depend on my boyfriend, so when David proposed, "I can stay with you for a few months, it's okay," I almost wanted to cry with emotion. I thought, maybe he really has changed. Maybe this is our chance to make things right. His apartment was an old, student-style room, peeling walls, small kitchen, intermittent hot water. But I didn't care. I brought pots and pans, a blender, a tablecloth, little things that made me feel home. I cooked, cleaned, did the laundry, even wiped down the cracks. James, my boyfriend, also helped a lot. Every time he came to dinner, he brought big and small bags full of food, fruit, and spices. "To make up for the portion you ate," he said with a smile. I still tried not to leave any burden on my brother. I didn't ask to borrow money, didn't complain, just worked hard to find a job every day. Everything was fine. Until summer vacation came. James invited me to his hometown for a few days, and David also went to visit his mother. Before leaving, I reminded him, "Remember to take out the trash before you leave." I finished cleaning the house, but the trash is already piled up. I just said yes. 10 days later, James and I returned a day earlier than David. The stench hit me as soon as I opened the door. I walked into the kitchen and nearly threw up. The trash bag was still in its original place, but the contents had decomposed and hundreds of white maggots were crawling around at the bottom of the bin. I was shaking. I couldn't wait. I wrapped up the trash bag, cleaned up the kitchen, and threw away the soaked plastic trash can. That afternoon, I went to the supermarket, bought an identical one, same color, same size, and put it back in its place. Who cares, I figured, as long as it's cleaner. But I was wrong. When David returned and I told him what had happened, thinking he would thank me, he roared, "What right do you have to throw away my stuff?" I bought that box. I was stunned. I replaced it with the exact same one, right? The other one was so dirty that "No! It's my house! You have no rights! Go away if you don't respect it. I saw his face was red. The veins on his neck were bulging as if they were about to burst. He walked up to me, pointing his finger straight at my face. I didn't recognize him anymore. He, the man I once admired, once believed to be my support, was now kicking me out of the house just because of a dirty trash can. I silently packed my things without saying another word. My heart ached, not because I was being chased away, but because I realized he never really saw me as a sister. That night, I slept on James's sofa. The next morning, my mother called. Before I could open my mouth, she said, "What did you do to make him angry?" "That's your brother's house. You're just a freeloader. I heard you threw away his things." "How rude." I didn't reply. I knew it was useless to say anything. In her eyes, David was always right, and I had been a thorn in her side since I was 13. After David kicked me out of the house because of the trash can, I promised myself I would never let myself get into that situation again. But that promise was like a scar, aching every time the weather changed. James told me to move in with him temporarily until I got settled. He didn't blame me and said, "If you still think he's a good person, then." I don't know, but I won't forget the look in his eyes when he yelled at you. I smiled sadly. I didn't want to make excuses for David anymore, but it was not easy to break a habit that had been ingrained since childhood, the habit of enduring, explaining, and forgiving those who had hurt me. I lived with James and his roommate, a girl named May, who was cute and surprisingly kind. She lent me her room, shared everything like sisters. It was strange to have someone treat you so well without asking for anything in return. No criticism, no control, no name-calling, just kindness. After almost 2 months, I received a job offer at an international media company, a dream position that I thought I was not good enough to get. I threw myself into the job like a thirsty person. Every day I got up at 6 a.m., came home after 9 p.m., but I felt free. James and I decided to move out when his lease expired. The new apartment was small but sunny and family-like. For the first time, I felt safe in my own home. Together, we bought furniture, curtains, and planted some small cacti on the balcony. As things started to get going, I thought about David again. I knew where he lived. A shabby rented room with a leaky plumbing system, a smoky kitchen, and a broken window. No matter how angry I was at him, I couldn't ignore him. Even though I was kicked out and insulted, I still felt indebted. One evening, while I was peeling fruit in the kitchen, James walked in. I asked him, "If I invite David to live with me for a while, would you mind?" He was silent for a long time, then replied, "As long as he respects you. But I hope you understand. Helping someone doesn't mean letting them walk all over you again." I nodded. I really believed this time would be different. I called David. He sounded surprised over the phone, but he didn't refuse. I made it clear. Just a few months to stabilize my finances, no need to pay rent or utilities, just try to live in harmony. He moved in one afternoon in February, just as the pandemic was starting to flare up again. I remember that day clearly. The sky was overcast, the rain was drizzling. It felt strange. I had been chased away by him, and now he was welcoming me back with open arms. James just glanced at me and walked into the room without saying anything. I cooked a warm welcome dinner. David ate it all, even asked for more soup. I felt relieved. Maybe everything would be okay. The first week passed fairly uneventfully. He slept late, didn't cook, didn't clean, but I said to myself, never mind, just moved here, probably not used to it yet. James remained silent, but I could see he was starting to get a little frustrated. I suggested we schedule chores together, each of us taking on a small part. David curled his lips and replied simply, "Up to you." But the whole week after, I was still the one who mopped the floor, did the laundry, went to the market, and cooked. Then one day, James and I went shopping for a new TV, a small gift for our new house. I eagerly planned to watch movies together over the weekend, to relax after a week of work. But as soon as the TV was installed, David quickly took over. He turned on Netflix from morning to night, lay on the sofa, crossed his legs, and snacked all over the living room. I noticed that James stopped coming into the living room. He avoided eye contact. One day, I came out of the room at 11 p.m. and found James sitting in the kitchen with his laptop folded. I asked him why he wasn't watching TV, and he just shook his head. There is nothing left to see. We are guests in our own home. I smiled, but inside I was full of bitterness. I started to feel like I was back in that place where I had to tread carefully, afraid of offending anyone, where I did everything, but it was never enough. I know that if I don't act soon, the same old script will repeat itself. But how do you tell someone, "You're living rent-free in my house, but you act like this is your own private palace," without being called selfish? I was still struggling with that question until the day the remote broke on the floor. That evening, I cooked James's favorite lemon butter salmon. I set the table in the living room, as I did every night. As I was putting away the chopsticks, I turned to David, who was sprawled out on the sofa, his eyes glued to the TV. I call, "David, dinner is ready." He didn't respond. Instead, he reached over and turned up the volume. I exhale. "Hold it." James came out of the kitchen, looked at me, and said softly, "Let me clean up first. Then you turn on the news?" I nodded. As James put down his bowl of soup, I reached for the remote and switched to the news. There was less than 10 seconds of silence. David turned around, his voice higher than necessary. "Who changed the channel?" I looked at him, trying to be gentle. "We want to listen to the news while we eat. There was a factory fire this morning." He grimaced as if offended. "I was in the middle of an episode, you know. It's rude for you to move." I smiled wryly. "We're eating together. You can continue watching after the meal." David crossed his arms and narrowed his eyes. "But you're the one who's been sitting here since this morning. The rule is whoever comes first gets to control." I froze. The last time I heard that was in 4th grade, in daycare. But here was a 30-year-old man grabbing the remote like a child throwing a tantrum over a lost toy. I still tried to keep calm. "You live here, but this is James and I's house. Please respect our shared space. We should share." David shook his head. "You don't share what you have first. Every time I take it." James interjected, his voice more decisive than usual. "David, it's just a TV channel. No one is taking anything from you. Please respect the meal." The air was thick. I looked at David, eyes narrowed, lips pressed together. He said nothing, just silently picked up the remote and switched back to the old channel. I put out my hand. "Give me the remote." He didn't respond. I repeated it, a second, a third, a 10th time. Then he stood up and hurled the remote down on the tile floor. The loud bang made me jump. The remote cover broke, the battery flew out, and it rolled around under the chair. I stood still holding the chopsticks. My eyes stung, but this time, not because of fear, but because I was disappointed. I swallowed hard and said, my voice not loud, but determined, "You have no right to throw things in this house, just like you have no right to treat us like that." David immediately shot back, "I live here. I have the right. I work all day. I want to rest when I come home, but you don't let me. James laughed dryly. You go to work? David, you've been home since this morning. You turned on the TV at 9. I even listened to cartoons during the online meeting. David was startled. But then he counterattacked immediately. It's better than you guys who just sit there typing. You think you're good at writing emails? I'm the one who actually does the work. I suddenly got angry. We study for our master's degrees, work, pay rent, cook, clean. You don't help with anything. Don't think you're working hard just because you stay at home all day. Unable to hold back any longer, I continued, each word bursting from my throat. You once kicked me out of the house because of a trash can. Now I take care of you, cook for you, and don't ask for a penny. And what's the result? Being called selfish and scolded for changing the TV channel. David stood up, red-faced, and shouted, You are crazy. You are seriously mentally ill. That sentence was like a slap in the face to my memory. The nights my mother used to whisper in my ear, You are sick. You are destroying the whole family. That sentence now echoed again from my brother. I didn't cry, but something inside me broke. James took my hand, gently but firmly. He pulled me into the bedroom and closed the door. That night, I didn't eat. And for the first time in years, I couldn't sleep a wink. The next morning, I woke up feeling strangely tired. Not from lack of sleep. I was used to little sleep, but from a sense of emptiness. Everything that had happened the night before, the broken remote, the curse, David's hateful gaze, replayed in my head, like a movie that I couldn't turn off. James left home early. On the dining table, he left a note. I'm sorry I didn't protect you more. I'm here if you need me. I sat down on the chair and looked out the window. The sunlight was shining on the floor, golden yellow, but inside my heart was all gray. The phone vibrated. It was Mom calling. I hesitated for a few seconds and then picked up. There was no greeting, just a reproachful sigh on the other end of the line. I just talked to David. I closed my eyes, counted to 3, then calmly said, Mom, I don't want to argue. I'm tired. Tired? Do you know your brother had to order takeout last night? No food, no one to take care of him. If he lives like that, what kind of home is that? I clutched the phone. In that moment, I realized Mom didn't ask if I had eaten, if I was okay, if I slept after being called crazy. I cooked the meal and set the table. He turned on the TV and got mad because I changed the channel. I did nothing wrong, Mom. She didn't let me finish, like always. You always have an excuse. You never admit you're wrong. I'm your guest, your brother. Why don't you give in? After all, we're blood relatives. I swallowed, feeling my chest heave. Growing up, I had never seen my mother stand by me. Not once. I used to think maybe I wasn't good enough. But today, I started to wonder, how much is good enough? Mom once told me that blood relatives must sacrifice. But how much sacrifice is enough? I live with him. He feeds me and doesn't ask for anything. I just hope for a little respect. But I can't get it. Don't boast. You invited him. You have to accept it. Don't turn around and complain now. I laughed, for the first time on this call. So, according to you, I was wrong because I was kind? Because I thought I could trust him one more time? Mother's voice was cold. You are getting more and more rude. I see you treating your brother as if he were a stray dog. I was speechless, not because the words are harsh, but because I realized. This is the image my mother always saw in me, an unfilial, rude, and unreasonable child. No anger came, just a deep sadness, like someone was slowly placing a rock on my chest. I whispered, "I don't remember you ever defending me, not even once. If I was wrong, you beat me. If I was right, you said, 'Don't be rude.' What am I in your eyes?" Silent. I heard her breathing, rapid and uncomfortable, but there was no answer. "Mom says I treat David badly. But did you know he hasn't given us a penny since we've been together? He saved $30,000 while we had to cut back and use our emergency fund." Mom replied, her voice somewhat worried. $30,000? He said he was miserable? I am bitter. Because Mom only listens to one side. Always like that. The call lasted almost an hour, with no end in sight. But in the end, I did something I had never done before. I asked her not to interfere with my life too. I am no longer the 14-year-old girl sitting in the corner crying because she was called crazy. If you still love David, I won't stop you. But please don't drag me into this vicious cycle anymore. I ended the call with a sentence that surprised myself. If you think I'm right, call me back in 2 hours. Otherwise, never mind. I'm tired. I turned off the machine. I sat still. I breathed deeply. For the first time in years, I felt lighter. Just a little. I didn't expect her to call back. But to my surprise, exactly 2 hours later, the phone rang. The caller ID said Mom. I picked up the phone, my heart pounding. "Elena," I thought about it. "You are a sensible, kind, and strong girl. I'm sorry for always forcing myself on you." I sat down on the floor, tears streaming down my face. It was just one sentence I had waited my whole life for. But why did it weigh so heavily? I don't need my mom to change completely. I just need a moment to know that I am not the crazy person they said. And I had that moment. That phone call with my mother was like a ray of sunshine in the rain. I thought that maybe this was the turning point, that after all these years, my mother would finally accept that her daughter was not the crazy person she had once labeled her as. I told myself, just give them another chance. Last chance. The next week passed quietly. Strangely, David didn't talk much, and he didn't leave the TV on all day like he used to. He even washed the dishes once. I noticed that James kept his distance, but he wasn't as grumpy as before. I thought, it should be fine. Then, one Friday afternoon, while cleaning the balcony, I slipped on a spilled plant pot. The fall that seemed light turned out to be serious. I clearly felt the sound sprinkling in his ankle, and the pain shot through his brain. I was lying on the floor, unable to get up. Luckily, James came home after only 10 minutes. He carried me inside and called an ambulance. The doctor's diagnosis, fibula fracture, requires cast and rest for at least 6 weeks. I was going crazy when I heard that. In the middle of a project, deadlines were looming, and my graduate program was about to be submitted, and now I was stuck in bed? James immediately offered to work from home so he could take care of me. He cooked, brought things into the room, and propped my legs up in the correct position. I felt lucky to have him, but also extremely guilty. And David? As usual, invisible. He didn't ask a question, didn't come into my room, didn't cook a meal. Instead, I heard him ordering food every night, and the sound of action movies echoing from the living room. I was silent. I was too tired to say more. Sunday night, as I was typing away at my essay with a feverish leg, the phone rang again. "Mom." I hesitated a moment and then answered the phone. "I heard you broke your leg?" "Yes, broken ankle, but I'm fine." She sighed, then fell silent for a beat. I waited for a question, a word of encouragement, but no, what she said next was, "David has had to order food for 3 days now. No one has cooked. I feel so sorry for him." I couldn't believe my ears. Mom, I broke my leg. I can't get out of the room. James is doing everything. It's true that I'm sick, but David is also a guest. He's not used to cooking. At least order him some food. I felt a lump in my throat. Should I speak up? Should I tell him everything about how David never gave me money for rent, never helped me, even when I was hurt? But I had no more strength to argue. I just said, I haven't eaten anything since morning. Have you thought about that? She was silent for a moment, then evaded. I know how you are, Mom. You just want peace in our home. Peace? While I lay there, my head in a mess from work, my legs aching like I had a fever, and my golden brother lay there watching TV and waiting to be served, Mom continued talking, a long string of mild accusations, that I lacked a sense of responsibility, that I was too stubborn, that girls should be gentle to keep the peace in the house. I interrupted. I lived with my mother for 18 years and with David 3 more times. All 3 times I was hurt. My mother never stood by me. Now I am lying here with a broken leg and still being blamed for not taking care of my mother's precious guest. Mother replied, her voice cold. Okay, I won't say any more, but I'll talk to David about paying the rent, if it's too much for you. I laughed, bitterly. I never asked for money, but at least I expected him to make an offer, not even a question of, are you okay? I hung up. 3 days later, David walked into the room with a bowl of porridge. I was surprised. He put the bowl on the table without looking at me, just said, I'll cook. James is tired. I didn't know what to say, but there was a strange sense of caution in my heart. That night, he knocked on my door and asked softly, If I pay 2 months' rent, will you be satisfied? I sat up and looked straight at him. I never needed your money. I just wanted respect in the house I was trying to keep safe. He shrugged. You are only hurting yourself. Then turn and leave. I sat there, stunned. The people I loved, my mother and brother, seemed to love only themselves. And me? I kept trying to patch up the broken nest with my own flesh. When will I stop? After the day David gave me a bowl of porridge and offered to pay the rent, I thought, maybe things are getting better. But I forgot one thing. In my family, every kind gesture is usually just a calm before the storm. A week later, as I was getting my leg bandaged and walking around the house on crutches, David knocked on my door and walked in. No greeting, no questions asked. I came to apologize for scolding you the other day, but at the same time, I want to hear you say, I'm sorry to you too for making a big deal out of it. I stood still, leaning on my crutches beside the table, tilting my head. I didn't do anything wrong to need an apology, David. I can't say that just to make you feel better. He sneered, coldly as if he were standing before a clown. So you still think you're right? You really think you don't have a problem? Don't you realize how you control everything? I looked straight into his eyes. I am not controlling. I just ask for a little respect in the house I am living in. He shook his head, then spoke each word as if to condemn. You have narcissistic personality disorder. I tell you the truth, you are sick. You only think about yourself, have no sympathy, and do not accept others. I stood frozen. Not because of fear, but because, too familiar, I had heard this before, from my mother. The nights when she shook me awake, the mornings when she whispered through her teeth that I was something wrong with my head. And now, my brother David was repeating those words, word for word. At that moment, I felt like I was 14 years old again, sitting huddled in the corner of my room, wondering if I was really crazy. I slowly sat down on the edge of the bed, a feeling of suffocation starting to tighten my chest. David stood there, his voice steady. "You need help. You should go to therapy again. I don't want to get involved with someone with mental problems." Then he left. Not a look back. I sat in silence. A few minutes later, James walked in. He looked at my pale face and my clenched hands. Without asking much, he just came closer, put his hand on my shoulder, and said, "Are you okay?" I whispered. "If someone told you you were crazy for 15 years, would you believe it?" James did not answer immediately. He sat down next to me. I told him about my visits to a psychiatrist. The first time, when I was 14, after my mother told me I had mild schizophrenia. The psychiatrist asked my mother to come along to observe me, but after the first session, she cut off all contact. Years later, when I was studying for my master's degree abroad, I took the initiative to see a therapist. I just wanted to know, is something really wrong with me? And the answer from both doctors was the same. No, I don't have any disorder, but I was deeply traumatized from childhood. I had kept it to myself for years, but now, as David repeated the same accusations like a carbon copy of my mother, all the emotions came flooding back. James squeezed my hand gently. "I know. I always knew you weren't crazy. There was nothing wrong with you. You just lived too long in a house where you had to struggle to survive." I cried. Not sobbing, just tears falling. Silently, as if I was washing away something deep inside my soul. The next day, I decided to call my mother again. I recounted it all. Every word David had said, every feeling of helplessness I had felt. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I just told it. As a matter-of-fact report. But Mom, as I expected, didn't listen. She kept interrupting me, telling me, "Don't overdo it. If someone is wrong, someone has to give in first." When I asked, "Have you ever stood by me?" she was silent. 1 minute, 2 minutes. Then, instead of answering, she turned to, blaming me for leaving leftovers in the fridge. "You put food in the fridge without telling me. How did your brother know to eat it?" I was speechless. In my mother's eyes, I was not only unfilial and ungrateful, but also responsible for making sure others ate on time and in the right way, as if I was invisible servant in this family. Finally, I said one sentence, no more resentment, just the truth. "I don't need you to defend me. I just need you to stop supporting me and looking down on me." Mother did not answer. I hung up, feeling relieved. That night, David sat quietly in the living room without turning on the TV. I walked by, saying nothing, but suddenly, he spoke up. "You know, I get angry because I feel like I'm always misunderstood, like I'm the bad guy." I stopped. I looked at him. "Do you ever wonder why other people misunderstand you?" He was silent. Then, for the first time in months, he bowed his head. "Maybe. I'm too used to being pampered. When asked to change, I don't know what to do." I just replied, "It's good to know. But whether to change or not is your choice." Then I turned, walked into the room, and closed the door. For the first time in a long time, I don't feel obligated to shoulder all the mistakes of others. I'm just Elena. And Elena. Not crazy, not narcissistic, not a failure. Just a girl learning to live without anyone's approval. The week after the cold conversation with his mother and David's vague confession passed in an eerie silence. No more screams from the living room, no more reproachful calls from his mother. Just a long silence, as if everyone was on a temporary truce. I'm not delusional. I know this peace won't last, but at least I have time to recover, both physically and mentally. The cast on my leg was gone. I learned to walk around the house with a small cane. With each step, I felt like I was regaining a piece of the self-control that had been stolen from me over the years. James was there for me like an anchor in the storm. He didn't ask questions, didn't force me to talk, but was always there. When I looked out the window in silence, he would place a cup of hot tea beside me and simply say, "Drink it. Don't let it get cold." One evening, after dinner and clearing the table, I sat across from David in the living room. There was no TV, no remote on the table, no place to hide. I looked straight at him and said softly, "David, we agreed that you would stay for a few months. By August, you will be settled and leave." He looked at me, eyebrows raised slightly. Well, not yet. I am patient. I have a stable job. I said I've been working for 3 years. Now is the right time to plan for my own space." David looked away, as if I had just insulted him. "I applied for a new job. If I get it, I'll transfer. If not, I'll have to stay and wait." I nodded, but did not withdraw my stance. I understand. But waiting is no excuse to avoid responsibility. Whether you will be here forever or not, there must be a limit. He pondered, then retorted, "I tried to change. I cook. I wash dishes. I even put up with your attitude. I don't argue. I just say, you do those things because you are living in someone else's house for free. That's not merit. That's basic courtesy." I continued, without trembling or fear. "I suffered too much, not because I was weak, but because I thought I could save you. But now I realize some people only change when they have no one else to turn to, and maybe you need to experience that." David sat still, not speaking. I conclude, "I'm not going to fire you, but I need a specific date, a clear timeline so the 3 of us can make a plan. You need to move out no later than August 31st. He frowned. "You just said you wouldn't fire me, and now you're saying deadline. Are you playing with words?" James, who was standing in the kitchen, came out and put his hand on my shoulder. "No pun, David. It's boundaries. Something adults need to know when living with other people." David didn't answer. He just stood up, walked into the room, and slammed the door. 10 minutes later, my phone rang. Caller ID. "Mom." I didn't want to hear it, but I picked up the phone anyway. "Did you just chase your brother away?" I exhaled, holding each word. "No. I was talking frankly about future plans. He can't stay in someone else's house without any responsibilities." Mom interrupted. "He is waiting for news about his job. Why can't you be a little more patient? Then you can take him home." She was silent. I knew she wouldn't do it, because Mother wants me to carry David, so that she can continue to maintain the role of good mother without having to actually act. "I don't understand you. Sometimes you're nice, sometimes you're cold. You change so often." I no longer felt offended. I just smiled, not because I was happy, but because I realized I was strong enough not to be controlled by those words anymore. "It's not that I've changed. It's that I've woken up. You should try it too." I hung up, without waiting for an answer. 2 days later, David started acting differently. He cleaned more often, didn't complain when I played music in the living room, and even asked James once, "Do you need any help?" But I know it's not a lasting change. It's just a temporary response to the pressure to leave your comfort zone. That evening, I said to James, "I don't want to be a dictator, but if I don't make a decision, things will go back to the way they were." He nodded. "You're doing the right thing. Setting boundaries isn't a bad thing. It's something you should have done a long time ago." I looked out the window. It was raining lightly. Each drop of rain hitting the tin roof was like a small beat of freedom. I know, the journey is not over yet, but at least this time I'm the one taking the wheel. After our conversation that set a clear deadline, the atmosphere in James's house became different. No longer tense, but no easier to breathe either. David is quieter, less conspicuous. He no longer sits in front of the TV. He leaves for work early every morning, something I rarely saw before. In the evening, he washes the dishes after dinner. Sometimes he even sweeps the floor. I want to believe you're trying, but I've lived too long in this loop to not realize. Sometimes, change doesn't come from awareness. It comes from fear of being left behind. One evening in mid-August, I had just come home from work, leaning my small stick through the door when I smelled a delicious aroma of food. Entering the kitchen, I was surprised to see David cooking. He looked at me and nodded slightly. I cooked. You rest. I said nothing, just sat down on the chair, silently observing. James wasn't there that night. He was busy with his thesis group meeting until late. It was just David and me, eating together for the first time in months. Like two normal people. David picked up a piece of fish for me and whispered, I know I was too much. I used to think you were the one controlling, but now I understand. Maybe I was the one making things suffocating. I looked up at him carefully. I don't need you to change for me, but I need you to take responsibility for your life. He nodded, then as if thinking about something for a long time, he continued. I have about $30,000 saved up over the past few years. I was planning on keeping it just in case. But now, I want to contribute to this month's rent and living expenses. As a thank you. I was stunned, not because of the money, but because he kept this secret all the time James and I had to dip into our personal emergency fund to take care of the three of us. You saved all that, but said nothing, even when you knew I had my bonus cut because of the accident, and James had his project suspended. David looked down and whispered, I don't think it's that bad. I just think you won't let me starve. I laughed, not because it was funny, but because disappointment was rising in waves. You are not wrong to be frugal, but you are wrong to take other people's kindness as a given, as an obligation. He was silent. Then he placed an envelope on the table. 2 months' rent. I don't want to go into debt. I pushed the envelope back to him. I don't need money. I need respect. And I need you to leave here as a grown man, not as someone who will repay you and continue to rely on you. He paused, something moving in his eyes, maybe embarrassment, maybe suppressed discontent. I looked straight. If I accept that money, my mother and brother will use it as evidence to remind us, to bargain, to return to the old story. Family helps each other. But in fact, help it only makes sense without the ropes attached. That night, I sat next to James in the room and told him everything. James sighed, then said, I wish I could say I believe David has really changed. But I see, it's still a cosmetic version. It doesn't last. I nodded. I think so too. But this time, I won't keep him just because I feel sorry for him. A few days later, I was sitting at work when my mother called. Her voice was urgent. I heard you refused the money David gave you. He wanted to help, but you looked down on his kindness. I closed my eyes. The old fatigue returned. I don't despise it. I just don't want to live forever in a circle of gratitude and be reminded over and over again like a debt. So you want your brother to go out? I'm calm. He has $30,000. He has a steady job. I think he can afford to rent his own place. Mom was speechless. After a long while, she spoke, for the first time seeming sincere. I don't know. He has that much money. Because I never asked. I just believed what he said. She sighed. Not of sadness, but of helplessness. I could hear the defeat in her breath. I don't need your approval, Mom, but you promised not to interfere anymore. Please keep your word. I hung up. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel guilty. That evening, David knocked on my door. I've put down a deposit on the new place, moving in next week. I just nodded, said nothing. He stood still for a few seconds, then blurted out, You still think I'm a burden, right? I looked at him, not angry, not pity, just the truth. No, I think you were someone who was loved wrongly, and I thought I had to fix that. But I don't want to play that role anymore. He nodded, not answering, then turned away. The door closed. There was no banging, no arguing, just a full stop for an old chapter. David started packing on Monday. He didn't say what day he was leaving, but I saw him quietly fold his clothes, take his laptop off his desk, and pick up small items like power strips, ceramic cups, and even the air freshener he had borrowed without saying anything. I don't interfere. No questions, no comments. James stuck to his guns. No getting close, no arguing. We gave David space, but we didn't let him control the atmosphere anymore. On Wednesday afternoon, I came home from work to find him struggling to remove the picture of James and I hanging in the living room. What are you going to do? I asked. I thought you bought this when I was a reviewer. I like this one. I was speechless. You have my opinion, but I'm paying. It's a part of me and James's memory. David put the picture down, not reacting. He turned away, but then turned back very quickly, his voice suddenly higher than usual. You are always right, possessive, and in control. You never let anyone have any power in this house. I exhale. Again. This isn't about the painting, David. This is about your refusal to accept that there are things that don't belong to you, even when you're there. I was about to turn away when he shouted, I just want to be recognized. Why am I always the one who is wrong? The freeloader? The loser? I was stunned. I didn't want it to be like that, but no one believes me. Mom always loves me in a way that makes others hate me, and you see me as a burden. I looked at him, and for the first time, I didn't see a clinger. I saw a killed, trapped in 30-year-old man's body, never been taught how to live without someone holding my hand. I walked over and sat down in the chair opposite. Do you know why I was willing to give you my room, share meals, and pay all the expenses? He was silent. Because I thought I could fix this family. Because I thought, if I was good enough, then Mom would love me like she loved you. If I was patient enough, then you would realize that I was also your real sister. My voice dropped. But then I realized, I can't love my mother. I can't bear it for you either. David looked at me, his eyes red. He opened his mouth but said nothing. Then, suddenly he bowed his head, his shoulders shaking slightly. For the first time in years, I saw him cry. Not crying because of losing, but crying because of being stripped naked. I walked over and gently placed my hand on his shoulder. He didn't resist. I just left him there, tears falling silently onto my palm. I don't say, no problem. I don't say, I'll be fine. I do not say, I forgive you. I just stood there, letting this moment don't be wasted by any empty promises. After a few minutes, he got up and went to his room. He didn't say anything more. That evening, James and I ate dinner in silence. On the table were 2 hot meals and a small portion wrapped in plastic, left outside David's door. I don't want to resume any old relationships, but I also don't want to walk out of your life with a grudge. If I have to leave, I want to leave silent, but compassionate. The next morning, David went to work early. I found a folded piece of paper on the dining table with my name on it. Elena, I will move out of the house on Saturday. I'm not sure I deserve your kindness, but if you need any help in the future, just text. Not because I want to repay the favor, but because I owe you something that no one has ever taught me in my life. Kindness is not for exploitation. David. I folded the paper and put it in a small drawer, not to keep as a souvenir, but to remind myself. Being kind is not about touching someone, but about not becoming the person you fear most. David left on Saturday morning, as promised. He packed his things neatly, without making any noise, without dragging his suitcase across the floor, without playing loud music, just a quiet retreat, as if he himself understood that this was a necessary end for both sides. I stood in the doorway watching him lock the small kitchen cabinet where he had placed my first meal. He turned and nodded. Thanks for everything. I nodded back. No smile, no wave. I was no longer at the point where I had to try to make every breakup amicable. And then the door closed. No one cried. No one blamed. There is only one perfect moment of silence, like a gentle bell ringing to signal the close of an old chapter. That afternoon, I spent 3 hours cleaning the entire apartment. James helped me remove the painting that David had touched, not because I was angry, but because I wanted everything to start over completely. I put a small vase of flowers on the dining table. I bought myself a new remote. I put some light jazz music in the background. The house is not big, but for the first time in my life, I see it as mine. The next week, Mom called. I did not pick up the phone. A few days later, she texted, "Honey, I heard David moved out. I'm worried about him. I wonder if he'll get used to the new place." I read it. No reply. I'm not mad at my mom, but I'm not the 14-year-old girl who needs her approval anymore. I have admitted it myself. A month later, I attended James's dissertation defense. He stood before the panel, presenting the work he had devoted his energies to for over a year. I sat in the front row, proud beyond words. As everyone applauded, I saw James's eyes find me first. He smiled, as if he were speaking without words. We made it. And really, we made it. One late autumn morning, I woke up earlier than usual and cooked breakfast for both of us. Fried eggs, toast, black coffee, simple but adequate. When James entered the kitchen, he was surprised. "What's the occasion today?" I shook my head and smiled lightly. "No. It's just, for the first time in years, I don't feel like I owe anyone anything." He hugged me from behind and whispered, "And you don't need to apologize for being true to yourself." That evening, I sat down to write in my diary. Under the yellow light, I reopened the drawer where I kept the note David had left. I read the last line again. "I owe you something that no one has ever taught me in my life. Kindness is not for exploitation." I folded it, then burned it. I don't burn out of hate. I burn for closure. Don't keep evidence. Don't keep damage. I don't need others to forgive me anymore, because I have forgiven myself. Forgive me for sacrificing so much. Forgive me for trusting the wrong person. Forgive me for trying to fix people who didn't want to be fixed. Now I am Elena, 28 years old, not anyone's sister, not anyone's shadow, not the defective child, just a woman who walked out of a toxic family and decided, I deserve a life where I don't have to force myself to be loved.